The knock on Daniel Harper's door came sharp and deliberate, the kind that didn't ask permission. It was barely 8:17 a.m., the sun still low, dew clinging to the trimmed lawns of Maple Crest Estates. Daniel had just poured his first cup of coffee when he saw two uniformed HOA compliance officers standing rigidly on his porch, clipboards in hand, faces already set in judgment. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you re-watching from. I love knowing who is listening. Daniel wasn't a rebellious man. He was a high school history teacher, a widower, a father of one teenage daughter who still left sticky notes on the fridge that said things like "Don't forget to smile today." He followed rules, he paid his dues on time, he waved politely at neighbors who barely waved back. But today the officers weren't there for politeness. "Mr. Harper," the taller one began, scanning his clipboard without looking up, "you're in violation of Community Guideline 14B, unauthorized garden fixture." Daniel blinked. Garden fixture? They stepped aside slightly, revealing the target of their authority, a small wooden bench beneath the old oak tree in his front yard. It was handmade, uneven in places, the varnish slightly faded. His daughter had painted tiny blue flowers along its edge last spring. "It's just a bench," Daniel said softly. "It's not HOA approved." The second officer replied, his tone clipped. "You were issued a written warning 2 weeks ago." Daniel had seen the letter. He had placed it carefully on the kitchen counter and stared at it longer than he'd like to admit. He told himself he would deal with it, but every time he walked past that bench, he saw his wife sitting there years ago, sunlight in her hair, laughing at something he had said. Removing it felt like erasing her. "I meant to appeal," he said quietly. The taller officer's jaw tightened. "You have 48 hours to remove it or face a $500 fine." A small crowd had begun to gather across the street. Maple Crest was like that: perfect hedges, perfect sidewalks, imperfect curiosity. Curtains shifted, phones lifted. Daniel felt something shift too, not anger, something heavier. A quiet exhaustion from always bending. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and tapped his phone screen. The small red recording light blinked on. The officers noticed. "Sir, you don't have permission to record this interaction," one of them snapped. Daniel met his eyes for the first time. "This is my property." The air tightened. Inside, his heart pounded harder than it had in years. He hated confrontation, he avoided it whenever possible, but he also knew something else. Silence, when misused, can become surrender. The officers began citing regulations, paragraphs, subclauses, aesthetic standards, words stacked like bricks. Daniel listened. He asked calm questions. He pointed out that several homes down the street had decorative statues, wind chimes, even a bright red mailbox that technically violated color guidelines. "That's under review," the taller officer replied dismissively. The bystanders leaned closer. The morning breeze carried whispers. A neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stepped onto her lawn and folded her arms. "It's just a bench," she muttered. The tension rose not because voices were loud, but because they weren't. Daniel felt the weight of every eye on him. He thought about his daughter coming home from school and seeing strangers haul away something that meant more than wood and nails. He imagined explaining why he hadn't fought for it. That's when he spoke again, steady, clear. "I understand rules," he said, "but rules without humanity aren't order, they're control." The words hung there. The taller officer shifted uncomfortably. "You're refusing compliance?" Daniel hesitated. This was the line: comply and keep the peace, resist and risk escalation. He exhaled slowly. "I'm requesting a formal hearing, and until then, the bench stays." One of the bystanders quietly said, "Good for you." The officers exchanged glances. They hadn't expected resistance, certainly not recorded resistance. Cameras change dynamics. So does an audience. The taller officer scribbled something on his clipboard. "You'll receive notice." They left stiffly, their polished shoes crunching against the gravel path. Daniel stood alone on his porch, phone still recording. His hands trembled now that it was over. He wasn't proud of trembling, but he was proud that he hadn't shouted, he hadn't insulted, he had simply stood. Within hours, the video spread across the neighborhood forum. Comments poured in, some critical, many supportive. Stories surfaced. Others had received warnings too: small things, paint shades, potted plants, holiday lights left up one day too long. The bench had become more than a bench. 2 weeks later, the HOA board meeting overflowed. Daniel almost didn't go. Public speaking terrified him, but he thought of the oak tree, of blue flowers painted with careful hands. When his name was called, he stepped forward. He didn't attack. He didn't accuse, he told a story about memory, about community, about why neighborhoods are meant to feel like homes, not display cases. The room softened. After a long deliberation, the board voted to revise Guideline 14B. Decorative personal fixtures would be allowed within reasonable limits. Fines related to minor aesthetic deviations would require mediation first. It wasn't revolution, but it was change. That evening, Daniel sat on the bench beneath the oak tree. The sky burned orange and pink above trimmed rooftops. His daughter joined him, resting her head on his shoulder. You kept it, she whispered. He smiled. We kept it. He understood now that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it records, sometimes it speaks quietly in front of neighbors, sometimes it simply refuses to let something meaningful be labeled insignificant, because communities aren't built on control, they're built on understanding, and even the smallest bench can carry the weight of love if someone is brave enough to protect it. If this story resonated with you, tell me your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Cinematic Whispers, where ordinary moments reveal extraordinary courage.